Welcome back to Miles and Mentors. We have an excellent one lined up for you today. We got Rodney Spillman, the manager of driver recruitment over at TransAm Trucking, joining us today. We're going to tap into all the lived and learned knowledge through his career in the logistics industry. So stick with us. We have an excellent one lined up for you right after this on Miles and Mentors.
Welcome to Miles and Mentors, the podcast that humanizes trucking, getting real-life advice and insights from logistics professionals from all over the industry. We sit down with those seasoned mentors who have put in the miles with a mission to pass on the knowledge gained from years in the industry to you. Now buckle up and enjoy the show.
Hey, Rodney, what's going on, man?
Not much. How are you?
Doing pretty well. I appreciate you jumping on today. I'm excited to jump in with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been,
100%,
been a wild
man. Right. Well, let's start out here, man. If you can, give us a high level of just who you are and what you're doing in the industry today.
Definitely. So, of course, Rodney Spillman, driver recruiter manager here at TransAm. Been in the transportation industry for 8 years now. Started my time over at TAF as a factoring sales rep, worked my way up into management, and now I'm at a large reefer company, help bring on new drivers.
That's fantastic, man. If we can, let's go all the way back to the beginning, though. What is it that brought you to this industry in the first place? Like, why logistics? Why trucking?
Well, I was actually in construction back whenever in 2016. And then unfortunately the company did close. So I was out there and the fabulous HR lady, TAPS reached out and said, "Hey, I know you have some sales experience. You want to come in for an interview?" And then it's wrote its book from there, dealing with, bringing in owner operators. Now I'm on the company side. So nothing really brought me to it. It was more of a, here we are, let's see what this does, and completely enjoying every bit of it.
That's awesome, man. We kind of share a similar connection there. I didn't realize. So I've got a long history in marketing, but before this, I was owning my own company doing low voltage stuff. So same construction type deal as well. And I got into this industry through a friend. Wasn't on the radar. What kind of construction were you doing, man?
So we did a lot of remodels, basically foreclosures. And what we would do is go in, gut them out, remodel them to what was the hip thing going on in Johnson County, Kansas, and then would resell them and make a little profit off of it.
Fantastic. We are getting a lot of like in and out with your microphone. Are you able to switch it all, or
what about now? There we go. I got you. I can hear you.
Perfect. I had to throw a curveball at you.
Of course. It's okay. Beats Audio doesn't always perform like they're supposed to. So kudos to Dre on that.
There you go. Yeah, no worries. We'll be able to chop out that little section there and just come back in. So we'll be all good with that. Well, man, I want to get in and dive into some of your industry experience here. Give me a little high level of what does a day in your role look like today?
Yeah, so I get in the office at 7:00. I always like to get in about 30 minutes prior to my recruiters, go through my emails, understand what the previous day looked like with phone calls, applications received, how many we actually got completed full, what was scheduled for the week of orientation. And then from there, continue to monitor emails, find out what my team can do better on the phones with reviewing phone calls, and continue that sales strategy throughout the entire day with monitoring phone calls.
That's fantastic, man. Now, obviously in trucking and logistics, the market goes up and down in every direction, especially, with hiring and retention and all that. What's something that you see is working in the industry now as far as recruiting?
The biggest thing with recruiting now in the industry is 100% transparency. I think, even going back to my days over at TAFS, we were one of the companies who were completely transparent about a lot of things when it comes to bringing owner operators on, staying on the phone with these guys, completing applications, completing the agreements with him on the phone. So that way, if there was any questions, it could be answered at that moment. I think what happens a lot of times is, hey, shoot me an email, let me look at it, and then it goes silent. I think the biggest thing people can do is just stay on the phone with people, make sure that all their questions are answered, and be transparent, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah. No, I like that. So you mentioned your time at Taft's there, and coming from construction, I gather you probably learned a lot during your time at Taft's, being on the phone with a lot of guys jumping into the industry, right?
Hmm. Correct. Yeah. I mean, that was huge. I mean, construction and truck drivers, the mentality is basically the same. You
Yeah,
have to get up early, you got to work hard, and you're going to have long days, you're going to have long hours, and continue to put your body through that strain, is one thing that is unrecognized.
definitely. So, I mean, spending your days talking to these guys, and typically, with that type of company, it's a lot of guys that are just starting out their companies, right? And that's kind of the demographic we're going after. Those guys that have been company drivers, branched out to be those owner operators, grow into fleet owners, etc. What were some things while talking to these guys on the phone that you would notice separated some from the others as far as successfulness?
There's what I see now. A lot of people want this fairy tale job to where you can stay
Mm.
local, you can be home every night with your family, um, but yet the realistic part of it is, as a truck driver, you don't really get that until you have tenure.
Yeah,
A lot of times, if someone's an owner operator, they're the they're wearing all the hats. They got everything from, if they want to grow their fleet, they got to do the recruiting or they got to hire somebody.
yeah,
They're doing the HR side, they're doing the compliance, they're doing the safety, they're doing all that stuff. So they're wearing all the hats, but at the same time, they have to drive. They have to
right.
drive. So these guys, are chasing obstacles left and right, but as an owner operator, you're doing it all by yourself. A
Yeah,
larger company. Now that I'm on my side now at TransAm, I really see everything that goes into a company as a trucking company.
right.
It's mind blowing how much things actually have to be in place in order to operate successfully.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. That's one thing coming into this industry. I'm working on the marketing side. I've got so much respect for these guys that are running these businesses like this. Like, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. I feel like I work my ass off, but at the same time, I get to sit down, I get to focus. I got a computer in front of me, whatever. It's like these guys are wearing literally all of those hats, trying to manage their business all while they're driving. And that is just props. I don't even know how to say it. I mean, there's so much to handle.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing that can really help, drivers be successful out there is you constantly got to talk with people.
Yeah.
I always like to say, closed mouths don't get fed.
Mm,
In that aspect, whether you're going through issues or whether you're having good times, you got to talk. I mean, you got to, in order for, you know, transportation and logistics to work like we want to, we gotta be able to voice our opinions and give the good and the bad. I think a lot of times all we hear out there is just the bad. There is a lot of good out there, whether it's spot market versus, contract rates.
yeah.
I know right now everybody's waiting for these rates to just go up and go up and go up, but it's going to take some time. And I think, us all working together and having a realization of what needs to take place is really going to help that.
Most definitely, man. Now, in kind of that time we're talking about, you had really a front row seat, especially to some of the financial challenges for these guys jumping into the industry. I mean, that's a huge aspect of it, right? When you go from being a company driver to an owner operator, you own the business, which means not only all those responsibilities we're talking about, but all the finances as well. And we've talked about it 100 times, right? Trucking, you can make a lot of money, but there's a lot of expenses too. So you really got to be able to balance that. What were some of the most common pain points that you would see with carriers getting into the game to really manage their cash flow and manage expenses?
Waiting. I mean, wait and pay terms.
Yeah,
As an owner operator, these guys have to wait, 30, 45 days before they receive payment, at an actual full amount. You can,
sure.
shortcut those ways by, taking quick pay or, factoring, of course. But on the company side, these guys are getting paid weekly, and so what happens a lot of times is you have people who start as a company driver, and then what happens is they want to get out here and be an owner operator, but they don't realize all the extras that have to come into place in order to get paid.
Right.
I think what I like to tell people now is my goal is to try and continue to boost the owner operators. What I really like to do is whenever we have a class come into orientation and go through our training and development, I always like going over there and talking about our independent contractor program.
Yeah.
It's very rewarding for those who stay out and drive, keep their availability up, understand what their overhead costs are, biggest expense being fuel, and how they can save money on that stuff. It's not cut out for everybody. Some people like being told where they have to go and where they have to fill up, but a lot of people like that freedom of being able to determine where they get to go, but not having to deal with all the extras, permits, base plates, going out there and finding their own loads.
Right. Now, you mentioned second there, I guess, with TAFs obviously factoring. When do you see that as a viable service? Now, I mean, now that you're outside of factoring, you can speak freely, right? But when do you see that as a viable service for somebody launching into their own business like this?
I mean, my thing, I would say when you first start. I mean, if you don't have a significant amount of money up front just to be able to cash flow your business, I mean, as an owner operator side, if you don't have contracts, you're working out of the spot market, plain and simple. There's a lot of fraud that everyone's talking about. There's so much fraud going on right now. You don't even really know when you're going to get paid or if you're going to get paid, or unless you have something there on your backside. I mean, me personally, if you could factor for 3 months to 6 months to get going, understand what that part of your business looks like,
right,
and see if it makes sense if you need to get away. I mean, if you're giving away 2%, 2 to 3%, and you're doing everything else on your side by going out here negotiating loads, and doing that yourself, you're going to be able to be successful. But you have to know what your break even is in order to be successful. I don't think a lot of owner operators, when they get in the industry, understand that. They're seeing, oh, I got to make $2 a mile. Do you have to make $2 a mile, or is that what you want to make? You really have to understand what your bottom dollar is.
Yeah, man, there's definitely a lot to take in there. One of the aspects you mentioned was fraud. And I mean, like you said, that is something that we're hearing more and more every single day. From your perspective, how big of an issue do you see it as in the industry today? And do you see that being curved in the coming future, or something that's going to be around prolonged?
I mean, AI is getting really, really good.
Yeah.
That's what's so crazy out there. Now, I think you're always going to have fraud. I don't think you can absolutely wipe it out. You're always going to have people who want to, squeak by not doing anything. That happens no matter what. Where I'm at now on the TransAm side, I don't see it as much because we deal with contract rates. We're not in the spot market where people are having to go and give out a lot of information in order to get set up with a broker or continue to do that stuff. But fraud, I think there's some Carrier 411, you have Carrier Assure, you have things like that.
Yeah.
That can help prevent, but it's never going to be stopped. But having a factoring company, can help prevent some of that stuff, with making sure you're doing your credit checks, making sure you're working with good people in the industry before you're accepting loads. But as a new owner operator, there's only a limited amount of people who actually want to work with you as an owner operator. So it's a double-edged sword whenever it comes to, starting your own business. And that's what makes it very, very challenging.
Yeah. No, for sure, man. And I think a big thing it comes down to is like we talked, how owner operators in most cases take this on all on their shoulders while they're trying to drive, right? There's a lot that goes into running a business, paperwork, phone calls, all this. And while you're trying to be on the road is a bit overbearing at times. Doesn't matter what service it is. I mean, obviously you want to make sure that it's the right fit for you and your company. But I think, if you can strategically align yourself with different factors like this, that, or, not factoring, but factors as far as, assets to your company, of letting different services take control of stuff a little off your shoulders, to help take that burden while you're out there making it work, especially until you're able to grow. With a lot of these guys jumping in, I hear it all the time. They jump in head first, and they're not always, with that firm foundation to really get off. What are some ways that, between the guys you talk to, what are some things that you saw they, didn't take care of first, or what's some things that you should take care of if you're making that leap from a company driver to an owner operator?
Well, number one is you have to make sure your equipment is there.
Yeah.
Some of the biggest overhead people have is, maintenance. A lot of these people want to run these nice fancy trucks, and they want to, have all the chrome, and they want to do all this stuff. But instead of using that as a truck, you got to use that as your tool. That is a tool for you and your company. That
Yeah.
is not something that you go to a truck show and you see those fabulous trucks. Matt's just happened not too long ago, and you see these, awesome and amazing trucks.
Right.
Those trucks aren't driving down the highway hauling freight. You got to make sure that the truck that you're going to be hauling freight with is a tool. It's not something that you want to go out and you just want to showboat around. And it's like a leisure car versus your working car. It's completely different. That's number one. I think another thing where I see a lot of people kind of get themselves in a bad predicament is they leave one company and they go out and start their own, and they just don't know. They think they can do it. They just don't have the money. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, last time I think I saw an insurance policy, it was like $40,000.
Wow. Yeah.
For like an insurance policy. I mean, that's insane, and rates are down, fuel's high, and you have all these expenses, but even getting insurance is very, very difficult. And that's what a lot of people run into, making sure your truck's in place and making sure your expenses are going to be able to get covered based off of knowing what you're going to be making.
I mean, that's a lot to consider. I mean, for a normal person going from a company job to trying to branch out to owning their own company, I mean, as we've talked, expenses, and they pile up. I mean, obtaining your equipment, but then the insurance, $40,000. That's insane for somebody in normal circumstances, that hasn't been running loads, working for a company. Not many people just have $40,000 sitting around. Is for somebody jumping into their business, is there any way to get assistance with that, or how do they typically come up with this money to get their insurance going?
I mean, that's very, very hard. I mean, from what I've heard is, banks don't want to take on any extra debt. They're not going to, loan out any money, because the only asset you have is, typically the truck, and, nobody wants to, take on that. It's as an owner operator, you have to almost be financially stable before you get out here and do it yourself. It's not something to where you can, you said you're an entrepreneur yourself. You have to have some kind of expenses set aside for your business, knowing what you're going to get into. There has to be some kind of expense prior to you starting. So that way, if you're, for your situation, if your channel doesn't pick up as fast, you have to have an expense set aside to take care of it until it starts being rewarded. It's the same thing on the trucking side. You have to have expenses to be able to sit back and wait for those payments before it starts coming in. First 6 months, I mean, you're going to be operating the negative as an owner operator. I mean, and that's a hard thing to to understand, but you're going to be behind the eight ball for a little bit.
Yeah, that's big, and that's definitely something to consider jumping in, to have that roadmap kind of laid out. Now, to jump a little bit down the road with some of these guys that you were talking to on the phones over the years, did you deal with a lot of these guys that were going from that point of being an owner operator to then growing a fleet? And if so, what were some of the challenges that they'd face at that level?
So with challenges of growing the fleet, I think the biggest thing is you have to trust somebody to operate one of your vehicles that you own. It's not every day that you say, hey, here's the keys to my, $180,000 truck, have fun. That's a very hard part. So that's where recruiting comes in. And what I've understood with recruiting is, it takes time to get the right drivers. You can bring drivers in left and right, but if they're tearing up your equipment and they're causing more damage than what they are bringing money,
Yeah.
that's an easy way to put people out of business. I think the most successful ones that are able to grow their fleet, it's more relational, family members, or somebody that you always saw at a truck stop and they've been around for it. There's a lot of drivers out there who can't find jobs right now because no one wants to hire them based off of experience, and I get it.
Yeah.
TransAm used to hire brand new graduates, back in 2020. Now we have a 1 year experience, and you have to have more time in the truck than out of the truck within the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So as prices climb, you want to kind of eliminate your cost, and accidents are huge. One accident can cost a company their entire business. So
Yeah.
recruiting and growing your fleet is by far, I think, the number one thing, making sure you have the right drivers, not all the drivers.
100%, man. Fully agree with you there. Now, coming in and learning this industry, obviously you learn a lot by being on the phone and talking to these guys every day, and seeing what's going on in the industry. Was there anyone that you would consider a mentor throughout your process in your career that has really helped you, within the logistics industry?
When I first started in logistics, one of the hardest questions I always would say why. Why not, or why? And one person who really pushed me to say that question would be Jeremy, my boss over at Taft whenever I was a sales manager. It's a simple question, but it's the hardest one to ask sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's having someone like that who pushes you every single day because they know that you have it. So I do appreciate what he's done and did for me when I was there. And then I think, I haven't met him, but Charles Gracie with cents per mile.
Yeah.
Going and just listen to what he says, and the knowledge that he gives is rewarding on the recruiting side. But those are two people that I really do try and follow as much as I can when it comes to obtaining knowledge about in the industry.
I love that, man. Now, kind of considering that, and we talked a little bit earlier about just making connections, right? And you can get some mentorship through that, but also just knowing people, networking, et cetera, getting into the space of jumping in to own your own business, grow your fleet, et cetera. How important in this industry do you see networking, connections, mentors, et cetera?
I think connecting with people is one thing, and you can always read what they post and those items. But if you're going to connect with somebody, you should always reach out and talk with them. Pick their brain, understand. I mean, we can add people left and right on LinkedIn, or send out business cards, or do items like that. But if you're not actually engaging with these people, then you're losing out. And I think that's one thing that I always try and do is, if someone does connect with me on LinkedIn, I always try and reach out, understand what they're doing in the industry, the good and the bad that they're running into. If I can get some knowledge from them and give them knowledge, I think that's a win.
I'm right there with you, man. I hadn't even kind of thought about that, but in the big picture, it doesn't matter what platform, right? Facebook, LinkedIn. A lot of times it does become a numbers game. We just get so used to just click ad, and we've got people there that we may know their face because we've seen them online, but we don't know them. And at the end of the day, they're not going to bring your name up because they don't know you, right? So that connection doesn't really exist to some degree. Yeah, that's definitely important to have those conversations, actually get on mind, because if you're able to have that conversation, somebody understands what you do, et cetera, and then somebody's looking for somebody to run a route or whatever, maybe you come up in that conversation because that person actually understands and has communicated with you.
Exactly. I think there's a lot of missed opportunities out there. You get of course, everybody gets to spam, contents through LinkedIn,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of people out there who are real and have real conversations and can give real advice. And, one thing that I learned from Charles, I was watching one of his episodes on YouTube, he always said, if you don't want to be a company driver, if you don't want to work for a company, you can see it right up here. Go truck yourself, go try it yourself and see what happens.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not easy to be a truck driver. It's not easy to own your own company. It's very, very hard. But a lot of people who want to be a company driver also want to give nothing but negative feedback about that company. Well, if you think it's so easy, I mean, go try it yourself. I mean, it's not. It's very, very hard. And it's rewarding for a lot of those who are successful. And, I applaud all those people who are very, very successful with their trucking companies. And I'm very, very appreciative for everyone who is in the trucking industry.
Same here, man. We've talked about entrepreneurs. I think, especially owner operators, like the ultimate entrepreneurs. It's a lot, and we would be absolutely nowhere without them. So mad props to all those guys.
100%.
Well, man, so you've taken on a few different roles in your time in logistics, from recruiting, training, sales, branding here. What's some lessons or principles that have definitely carried through with you, that you see adding to your success today?
So two things that I always live by. It doesn't matter what you do in life. There's two things that you can always control, and it's attitude and effort. Those are two things that I always try and practice. Yeah, you're going to have bad times, but they won't last for long. Your attitude is a mere image of what you get out of a lot of things, and
Yeah.
along with your effort. Those are two big things. Just having positive energy. Um, being able to speak, every Tuesday I speak in front of our entire organization here at TransAm. I try and always leave them with a challenge or something to do differently, to make themselves better. Because if we're staying in the same spot, we're not growing. And we always got to continue to grow. We always got to continue to water, the grass. It's only green when it's watered. And if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not taking care of, people who are around you with positive attitudes and effort, everything else is going to take care of itself.
I love that, man. That's fantastic. Dude, I really appreciate you coming on today. We love to have people on from all different facets within the industry, because I think that's important to the end driver, especially jumping into being an owner operator, owning your company, to understand there's a million little gears out there within the logistics industry making this whole thing work. Obviously, the drivers are at the center, but we need all these different gears. And I think it's important to understand what all those gears are, what they do, and ultimately kind of how they impact the driver at the end of the day. So I really appreciate you giving some insight on that. Before we let you go, I want to tap in, because we've talked a lot about your time at TAFs and such, but with TransAm, you mentioned they're making changes, et cetera. What's on the forefront with TransAm these days?
Yeah. So TransAm, we're trying to gear our focus towards, my goal is to have nothing but independent contractors, but we know that's
Okay.
not always going to work out. Um, but it's staying out there, staying available. Being one of the leaders in the industry, hauling reefer. Um, we did align with Prime. I think that was a big positive for us, and we've seen a lot of benefits by aligning with Prime because it's allowed growth, within our organization. And I think, moving forward, you're going to continue to see positivity come from this side of the company. Team driving, TransAm got away from team driving. We're trying to get that ball rolling back up. So bringing in teams, those who come together, ride together, and continue to grow, be successful, and hear our drivers, listens to our drivers, because ultimately, if we don't have drivers, we don't have a company. So we got to listen to those guys, and if it makes sense, we make a change. But that's where I see us going. Right now, we're sitting right around 500 trucks, and looking to continue to grow. So
That's awesome, man. For me, I've worked in marketing and logistics for about a decade now, but well before I was ever even thought of this industry, Trans Am was a big name in my eyes. Growing up around Kansas City, I'd always see Trans Am trucks, even as a kid. So it's always been an awesome brand to me. With this whole Prime affiliation thing, you see a lot going on the internet with it, but what does it actually look like with you guys?
yeah, so I mean, basically just hauling loads for them. I mean, just hauling their trailers. You're still operating underneath Trans Am Authority. You are a Trans Am employee, but you get the Prime's a very, very large company.
Yeah.
They have, I mean, large. I mean, roughly, I think it's close to like 8,000. But by working with Trans Am, you get the smaller niche type of company. You're not just looked at just as a number, you're looked at as a person. But yet you get the benefits of hauling Prime's freight. And it's been very, very rewarding for those who have come aboard here at Trans Am.
I love that, man. So it sounds like all good things on the horizons, and Trans Am is a name we're going to hear for a long time.
That's right.
Fantastic. Well, man, we've covered a ton today, and I'd love to get you back on in the future. But for what we're going on right now, anything that you think we've missed that we should touch on?
No, I just want to say thank you again for having me on here. I look forward to many more times in the future. And if you guys ever have any questions, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. Any drivers out there looking for a driving position, you can go to the Trans Am's website, click on careers, hit apply, and be happy to have you on board with us here.
Fantastic, man. Just so we can get them in the show notes, what is the website for Trans Am, and anything else that might be important to throw in there?
Yeah, so it's going to be transamtruck.com.
Fantastic. We will get that added in the show notes below. And dude, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day today, letting us pick your brain, and definitely would love to have you back on. So we'll be in contact about that.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
All right.
I
Thanks for
appreciate you.
everything you do, man. And everyone out there, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, stay safe out there. Have a great day.